Was a day where MLB owners basically told players that we're good if we miss a season. Sorry, a month, maybe even 2 months of the season. We're good. We're just gonna wait and chill until we get the deal we want. Was that a threat? Did the players take it as a threat? I don't know, but the meetings went deep into the night and a deal did not get done tonight, but it seems like they're getting a little bit closer. We'll definitely hit on that a little bit, but we have Cuban expert Phil Selig joining the show, and we'll talk about the Astros Cuban pipeline a little bit on this edition of the Astros podcast, Locked On Astros podcast.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Huysman. You can find me on Twitter at Eric Talks Stros. You can find the show at Locked On Astros, your team every day. Now, my twin, where can you find you on Twitter?
They can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on Twitter and Instagram, and at Stros411 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Always positive, always Stros.
And what's your name, sir?
Oh, I'm H-Town Wheelhouse.
All right, and we have special guest, Phil Selig. Go and tell us about you and where they can find you on Twitter.
So all of my handles are Cuba Dugout, and they can come find me at cubadugout.com, where I post original photos, original stories, original videos, and original thoughts on everything kind of in the Cuban baseball sphere.
All righty. So thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen. Whether it's on YouTube, go and keep on subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, go and subscribe to us. And make sure you watch us every day and give us thumbs up and listen to us on your way to work, way home to work, on Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Go and check out the Locked On Astros podcast. So I know that we're probably going to talk about some of the important stuff like what's going on with baseball. But I do want to talk about something else because I'm really tired of the lockout, and we're probably going to be talking about it for a month or so. So let's talk some Astros baseball. Let's talk about the Cuban connection. Let's talk about this. I know, Brett, you're talking about Chandler Rome's article about the shortstops and the shortstops and outfielder position. The whole Pedro Leon situation where they played multiple positions. What have you seen so far, Phil, with Pedro Leon as a maturing through the minor league system?
Yeah, so watched him from afar, obviously being kind of
Right.
stuck here in Canada, and so with Leon, I've seen a lot of good things out of him. Been breaking down the numbers a little bit deeper and spending a little bit more time on Baseball Savant with what they do provide there, because the numbers overall don't look eye popping. But when you do break it down, kind of into the different parts of the season, obviously played at different levels. Once you get past a slow start, you see that there are some things to like there. And I think the biggest mistake that they made, although I don't necessarily blame them, they wanted to find out, what they have in that tools of starting him at shortstop. I think that adjustment was tough at first, but once he kind of got comfortable, moved to the outfield and, got a chance to start playing regularly, shook off some of the rust. There was a lot to like there.
No, yeah, definitely. Pedro Leon is one of those guys that I think there is a lot of questions about, not necessarily if he'll come up, but the question is when he'll come up and when are these guys ready? I know that Pedro Leon, he signed as a center fielder, but he's been playing shortstop through a lot of his time with the minors. Of course, the Astros did this with Miles Straw, where he actually played some games when Carlos Correa was injured, I'm sorry, to go off what Eric mentioned earlier about the Astros playing in different positions. That was something that Chandler Rome recently talked about in the Chronicle, and we've seen this. Do you see Pedro Leon? I mean, I've heard from people that are, I guess, semi-close to the team that they've really got their eyes set on him being the center fielder of the future. Of course, this was before the rise of Myers. This was before McCormick really hit the scene. Does Pedro Leon have the ability to be your everyday center fielder, or is
I
it
think
just too
so.
early to tell?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think, and I think that would be the ambition. Although his greatest tool is his arm, so that could foretell a move
Right
to right
field.
field if need be. So there's a lot of organizational need that I think that'll drive that. It's funny that you mentioned that push for shortstop, and again, I don't blame any organization. And what we've seen with a lot of young Cuban players that have come up, maybe it's some of the mystique kind of their limited time on the island, limited eyeballs that you want to flush out if the person can be a shortstop. And even in compiling my recent article looking at the myriad players that are in the Astros system, it almost became a little bit comical to me how many guys are listed as a shortstop. But obviously you want to find out if a young player has that ability. But I think especially with a Leon, if you do a check down list, I think they've already kind of moved off that shortstop idea. So next you're going to see if center field is the way to go. But it does seem as if his greatest tool is his arm, and so I mean he could definitely shift over to right field if your organizational need is there.
Well, like Brett, when you and I were talking about this, I think this goes back to when Astros had Tony Kemp. You have players like Aledmys Diaz. You want the player that has the multiple, the position flexibility. I don't want to use Garrett Stubbs as that because I don't really think of Garrett Stubbs as an outfielder, but somebody that can go play the outfield, come in and play a different position. So I think that's what they see Pedro Leon as, somebody that can maybe play some shortstop, then go play the outfield and something like that. So that's what they're looking at. If your shortstop gets hurt, let's bring in Leon. He got the experience. They did that with Miles Straw as well. They didn't really play him much at shortstop, but they got him the experience. And so I think that's what the Astros are doing with players like that. So I think we haven't really seen the future yet with Leon, but I know that I was looking at Fantasy Baseball magazine, and I know Jeremy Pena is kind of in that magazine. He's forecasted as the Astros starting shortstop going to this year. But I think that will also determine how much they really push for Pena to go. Leon to go to shortstop. But I think that they're going to continue to play him like that. So I want to ask you, Phil, have we seen the best from Alvarez yet?
Well, so I mean, him rebounding obviously from the knee surgeries. I know there was a lot of concern missing basically a full season at a young age. I guess the positive is that he's shown an ability that a lot of young players don't have to basically be a full-time DH and not have it kind of get into their head. So it's not like you're worried that he's going to lose a lot of mobility. So as long as you're fine with him being your DH and with the numbers he's been putting up, I can see why you would. I think that he is. I think he's got potential to do more. I hope he proves me wrong and goes off. But worst case. Actually, I shouldn't say worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is those knees blow out. But a more realistic is even if he just continues at the clip he's been at, I think that's a hell of a player.
Right.
And to ask for anything more is of course we're all greedy. But I think what he's done so far is pretty incredible. And it almost sits as an outlier compared to many of the other players that that we've seen come from Cuba. Some of that is just purely based on his age, but realistically, he is the only player so far kind of in that age cohort. I know Luis Robert had a big impact once he came back from injury, and his ceiling is through the roof. But Alvarez really stands out to me as that one kind of in-betweener between a Yuli Gurriel, Jose Abreu, these veteran guys that come over, and this new crop of young players that have that longer runway, but we really haven't seen anything out of just yet.
So I want a couple questions from our viewers right now. I'm going to kind of pull them together. Mr.
Mhm.
Corona and Mr. Cesar Rodriguez. Corona asked about Yuli retiring, and I know that's the big thing. Later on, or even after this, you can tell me whether you think Yuli's going to play till he's 40, because he sure looks like a spring chicken out there. I mean, he's aged very well, it seems like. And So he says if Yuli retires from activities into a 2 to 1 year hiatus, then comes back, or, does he become a scout for the Cuban players for the Astros, or do the Astros, sign him on? And just in addition to him being a legend, not only in the organization, but also in Cuba, his influence as a young players is someone like Yuli, someone like Alvarez, are these guys that really make heads turn for Cuban players and make the Astros like one of the top places to land if they make it to the majors?
So I think it depends what you define as scouting. So while I was in Cuba, some news broke that Yuli was actually planning his first return to the island since he left. Apparently, a bureaucrat gave the nix to that. So if you're talking about scouting going to the island to do any sort of
Right.
that doesn't appear to be an option. What we are seeing with more of the players today is they are getting out younger. So it's similar to a lot of the other Caribbean islands, and the Dominican is almost becoming the epicenter for that. So in terms of where players are going to sign, I mean, there are some things that are changing that way. Historically, it's always been who offers the most money, but make no mistake about it, once they land in that spot, I think that having a Yuli Gurriel there has made the transition so much easier, and that's why Houston is kind of built that pipeline, and why they've probably had more players that have come and had an impact, and less issues off the field in terms of having that person there, adjusting to life, learning how to be a professional, and along those lines. So I think him involved in the organization no doubt makes it
Right.
a place where once a Cuban does sign, probably feels a little bit more comfortable in their transition. I know that he works out quite a bit in Florida with some of the other younger players, and actually his older brother Unieski runs kind of a camp down there, and some of the other bigger signing names out of Cuba that maybe haven't made their debut in the majors just yet have been working there. So that's even permeating into the broader Cuban community in the major league circles. But yeah, you know what you say. His fitness looks strong. He obviously bounced back this year, and I touch on some of that. I have a video on my YouTube page, kind of some of the changes that he made this year. So, can he keep playing? And even if he wants to, could he move somewhere else, even if his bat starts to drop off a little bit in that production, and slide back to second base? As much as that doesn't seem like a natural move, but I bet you he could have that skill, and potentially look at staying on and being more of a utility player, and that veteran presence on a bench, if in Houston or somewhere else.
So I wouldn't bet on him becoming a scout, Brett, but you know what? You should bet online. So tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. Football might be over for the season, but basketball's in full swing, and they are heading towards the playoffs. We have pro and college hoops heading towards March Madness. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. I mean, think about the hot topic in Houston. They hired Lovie Smith. Now the reports are coming out that they may have to actually release Deshaun Watson. And if they do that, where will Deshaun Watson land? BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today and use your mobile device and learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Alrighty. So I know this was back in January, but the Astros signed Alberto Hernandez, Kenny Gomez, and Carlos Espinoza. And the Astros reached 21 Cubans in their MLB system. This is the first time the MLB team has more 20 Cubans or more since the 1960s. So I know you kind of mentioned a little bit why. Maybe it is the Yuli factor. Maybe why is it? And then kind of talk to us about a little bit about those three new signings.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of chicken and egg there, and so because the one caveat I give to people is if someone reaches out and says my favorite team is X, I wish that they would sign multiple Cubans. So like you have to understand how that trickle happens. I mean, the numbers are growing, make no mistake about it, and so the Astros have definitely had success, but you know other than the money, in some regards, looking back on it, the Yuli signing was a no-brainer. Yordan Alvarez, as I think we discussed last time, was a little bit of a different path to the franchise, that they thought they were getting someone else, or the Dodgers thought they were trading someone else. So, I don't know what you learned from that. Lidmus Diaz at the top level, I think, is one of the top utility players. Kind of came over. So.
Right.
This new crop of players are very different than what we've seen in the past. So I think, as an organizational focus, Houston, is looking at it and saying, if everyone else is focusing on Dominican and Venezuela, although obviously they do some of that as well, that their scouts are probably getting the first look at some of these players when they arrive in the Dominican. And also, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there is some intel that, if people are having conversations in the background, that Yuli Yordan have some of that intel on a player. But I would suspect more of that on character and personality and that sort of thing, which are big things. So, it's kudos to Houston. They've been aggressive on it. The price has dropped on a lot of it too, though. So, I mean, there's the risk has been mitigated in that regard. And so, you look at, even from last year to this year, $4 million for Leon, leading the market, to, spending considerably less. And so,
Right.
are you going for, as a mature player with even a small history now? It's actually moving into you're betting on tools, which, I mean, is what you're doing with any prospect, but especially in this, that it's much more a push of those tools. But again, I think that the organization, and we've discussed it here, it's an easier landing spot for a lot of these kids that are kind of venturing into a new world.
So I see on your article you have several pitchers. You have like Roger Benavidez, who is a right-handed pitcher. In the low minors, he throws between 91 and 95. You got Franny Cobos, who's a right-handed pitcher, AA. Do you see any of these pitchers moving up through the ranks into AAA, coming to Sugarland this year? Or are a lot of those guys still kind of a year or two off, a year or two out for making that big of a jump?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of projects in there. So now, that being said, I think the biggest caveat is going to be, because when you drill down into the numbers, as much as there's not much to look at, I mean, on average, these guys are 19, 20 years old. And even if they've been in the system for a little bit, either they've been buried in the Dominican Summer League, or they lost time due to the lost minor league system, or the lost minor league year in 2020. And then, what do you take away from last year? So I think, it's got to be tough. Most of them are kind of in the low minors. So that being said, is Houston basically gambling on a lot of different lottery tickets there, again, for what they paid for them? I don't think it's that big a risk. But yeah, gun to my head, looking at that list, and as I delved in, as I compiled it, I don't necessarily see that impact arm that's making a jump right away. But also, this is where a level of my bias kind of plays in, that we've seen the arms lag behind. Like, it's, other than, say, in Aroldis Chapman, we're not really seeing that many. We're not really seeing that many arms have the impact that the bats are. Now, that being said, what we are seeing a change in these types of players is they are outliers in, as you mentioned, throwing 92, 93, 94, 95. So that's an outlier on the island. So all of these kids that can do that are being scooped up, but they're very much projects when they are coming on shore.
Yeah, so I want to go back to a question I asked earlier. Kenny Gomez, Carlos Espinoza, Alberto Hernandez. I know that Kenny Gomez is the highly rated prospect of that group.
Mhm.
What do you see him? What's his ceiling?
So yeah, it's similar. Like, I know that people like his tools. He's a younger kid, and so we haven't seen really anybody break through just yet that's gone through that pipeline. Now, it is relatively new, and what I mean by that is kind of the last big free agent signing off the island was Luis Rober before they kind of changed that system into where we are now, where you are seeing these 16 and 17-year-old kids that are signing, which, historically is more of a Dominican precedent or a Venezuelan precedent. So, just reading what I've seen, it's very hard to find footage, and obviously he did not play in the Cuban National Series. So it's very much a gamble on tools. So, it's not the best answer to say, do I think that he's in the same category as Pedro Leon? Probably not. But a lot of it is the development that you have with these kids. They've got tools, but can you morph them into what you want them to be? So I've read that he's very raw toolsy athlete, which I mean they're going to say about everybody that signs at this time of the year. But beyond that, haven't seen too many projections. And but if you look at kind of the amount of money that he signed for and where that market's going, I wouldn't get my hopes up that he's necessarily in that echelon. But you never know. Again, we've seen players come out of nowhere before.
No, yeah, definitely. I want to share this. Jay Roberts, who's a regular viewer of our show, says this. He says, "Fun fact: the inaugural season in 1962 for the Astros organization, the team's only real offensive standout was from Cuba, Roman Mejias, who hit 286, 24 home runs, and 76 RBIs, and then." Astroworth Craig says, Mejias was my stalwart outfielder in my Commodore 64 computer baseball all-time
I gotta ask
Astros
what game
team.
that was. Was it micro league baseball? Put that in the comments, because I played way too much of that as a kid and aging myself at the same time. So
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, that dude, I remember playing those games. I remember having a Commodore 64, and that was kids these days don't
What's a
understand.
Commodore 64?
Oh, you're
Uh-oh.
younger than me. Wow. Sorry. He only got to America in his 20s. No, I'm joking. But you and I have talked about this, Phil, and I noticed this huge influx of the younger players, and you mentioned on Twitter, you're like, this is great that they're being signed, but this is really watering down the Cuban National League. Like the Cuban baseball teams are losing talent left and right. They were already losing a lot more to Japan because Japan was paying out these contracts. So while it's good to see these Cuban players, but for Cuban baseball, the quality of baseball, it's kind of hard for them to hold on to this mystique that they have if all their talent is leaving so quickly.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, so I'm a big major league fan. So just like everyone else, I'm in the same storm as they are, waiting to see what happens with the talks, maybe just in a different boat. And thankfully, at least as my respite, have been able to see baseball both in the flesh this year and to watch it on TV. And so there is no doubt that there has been the attrition is massive. Now, I always say I want to see every player get the opportunity that they can to make the most money playing at the highest level. So we've kind of moved past that in my eyes, and that yes, we do have a stronger pipeline of players that are getting a chance. We had 27, which wasn't a record, but it was pretty close. We had 27 players playing the major leagues. And I think we've got 170 in the system. The reality is, though, that for a lot more players now are leaving, maybe just because of the financial realities of Cuba being tough during COVID, and so taking a shot on that. So what the federation can do to make things better, it's tough. Sometimes they can't seem to get they trip over their own feet over many decisions. It is tough because the Cuban baseball fan is still passionate, and one of the things that I really enjoy when I'm there is spending time with former players, just the average fan, journalists, and kind of, even in my broken Spanish, trying to talk as much as we can. The culture's there, but another thing that I frequently say is the Cuban baseball fan is increasingly similar to the North American, the Canadian or the American baseball fan, in that, they'll be extremely patient, but you have to give them a good product. And so that's kind of the point that we're at, that the Cuban fan wants to support their team, but it gets tougher at different points. So, but yeah, it's it's a pipeline that needs to be cultivated, and they try their best. There is still a lot of talent there. Most of it probably is going to skip over the National Series, and it kind of pains me to say that, because it is something that I'm very passionate about chronicling and providing insight on. But we shall see what solutions there are, and whether or not there is chatter of an international draft moving forward. And so it's there's probably a lot of changes there's a lot of changes that are probably coming down the pipe.
All right. Speaking of pipeline, what about a Built Bar pipeline, Brett? That sounds great.
Yeah, well, if you had a Built Bar pipeline, it would be wrapped in 100% chocolate, and it would be amazing. It would be good for you because why? Because Built Bars are healthy. They now have these things called marshmallow puffs, and it is the first protein-infused marshmallow. That's right. Only in this country can you have a marshmallow infused with protein, wrapped in 100% chocolate, and it still be good for you. So check it out. They have all these great flavors. We actually just ordered these mint ones, and they taste like those Andes mints that you used to get in Olive Garden, which we know is not really an Italian restaurant. But anyways, I digress. Those Andy mints, that's what they taste like. It's amazing. They have an average of 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar. That will blow it out of the water because it gets you what you need and the minimum calories that you need to take in. They have white chocolate cookies and cream. That's a special flavor, but they always have specials going on every month. So check it out. Go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 50% off at built.com.
All right. And if you need to get to a ballpark to practice baseball because you can't go to spring training, you need a vehicle, and you can't do that if it's not working. So you need rockauto.com.
That's right. The increasing numbers of makes and models. It's now impossible to get to your local auto parts store. I love live reads every day. Why endure often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning when you can just go to rockauto.com? It's a family-owned business. You'll spend 30, 50, sometimes 100% more on the same parts. And when you go to the auto parts store, they're going to upcharge you because you're not a mechanic. Well, not at Rock Auto. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. We encourage you to discover your own car part needs and check out rockauto.com. Go explore the easy-to-use website today and find the solution for your auto parts. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in there. How did you hear about us box so that they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
It's a really, really big shame that that the Cuban league won't let, or Cuba won't let Yuli back in, because he's technically available to play baseball right now. Bryce Harper is actually saying, "Hey, Tokyo Giants, do you want to hire me? Just contact my agent, Scott Boras, and I'll come play for you." And technically, there's nothing to stop these guys from going to play abroad right now, and because they're technically locked out. So these players could technically go. You saw what's that guy's name from the Yankees we don't like?
All of them? I'm joking.
He's
Sorry.
Aaron Judge. Is that his name? Aaron Judge.
Aaron Judge, yeah.
Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo made a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I saw that. I
So
saw that. He's like,
these
I'm new here.
guys are making a joke about this whole thing. And so I want to kind of shift gears a little bit for this. I mean, wouldn't it be great publicity for Yuli Gurriel to be playing for? I don't know if the Cuban League is going on right now, but wouldn't it be great for the Cuban League to have Yuli Gurriel playing first base, have guys like Jose Abreu playing out there, then some of the stars going back to Cuba, play for a couple weeks?
So a couple thoughts. First and foremost, if Joey Gallo wanted to make his way back, in Spanish, Gallo is actually Gallo, which is rooster, which is Yuli Gurriel's original team. So Gallo playing for the Gallos would be a wordsmith's dream. But the politics obviously preclude that from happening. But I should mention that a lot of players, or an increasing number of players, that actually did sign some that might have had a cup of coffee, at least in the majors, have been repatriated back into the National Series. So it's kind of one of my predictions as to why one of the teams, the Matanzas Cocodrilos, who are in first place right now, are probably my pick to win it, because they've got a couple of former farm hands. One is Yadir Drake, and the other is Aribel Arubuena. I can never say that right. He called me out one time, but that we're both in the Dodger system. So that is a path that we are seeing some players doing a little bit more of, but most of the time it's kind of guys that, maybe got out, flamed out, and are playing in Mexico or Dominican, and, just wanted to get back into Cuba, because that love of country still exists. There's no doubt about it. I mean, a lot of guys would like to be able to spend more time there, but some of the players are able to come and go, have been able to reinvest money. It's just, it's always kind of a very personal situation, and kind of a political situation as to who gets to enter and who doesn't.
Now, with the Astros, of course, they have a long history with Cuban players. Is it just that they had the right people in at the right time, with getting Yuli Gurriel? Did they just have this like magic formula, them and the White Sox? Because they seem to be the leaders in major leagues in bringing Cuban players over. What do you think that they did differently that other clubs maybe weren't doing?
Yeah, so I think when you look at it, where both teams were positioned, because the pivot moves are Jose Abreu and Yuli Gurriel. So, I mean, I called it at the time, so I'll give myself a pat on the back, but yay, I'm a genius, because I called the two biggest names that have been playing there for the past decade to be potential stars. But I think there's a level of happenstance, there's a level of trusting the scouts that in the organization that did say these guys can help us. But I think if you do look at where the White Sox and where the Astros were kind of in 2014, 2015, 2016, we're in rebuild mode, and we're in a position that now a number of other teams are probably kicking themselves for not making that move. But, kind of signing those guys in the middle of their rebuild, and kind of having that opportunity to not necessarily have a lot of payroll committed to other players. So, as I mentioned before, they fell into a little bit of a different category that probably doesn't exist anymore, when you look at the fact that the Gurriel got was about 46 to 60 million, just off the top of my head. So which, looking back at the value they've gotten out of him, was a pittance, but was no small amount of money, and then probably paid a penalty on top of that, as we sort of saw with the White Sox and Luis Robert, that when they signed him, he got 26 million, then they paid 26 million in tax. So I think there's a number of different things there that they basically at that time signed the right player, because they had that organizational need and an opportunity to put them in, and the willingness to spend those dollars.
Are we looking at Yuli Gurriel being a surefire Hall of Famer if he comes over at a younger age, if he comes over in his prime, 2021, and spends his entire career in MLB?
I think so. If you think about what he's done since he got here at an advanced age, and becomes becomes the oldest first time winner of a batting title. If he had 10 extra years, as a younger player. Now, I mean, the seasoning in Cuba definitely helped him in terms of making a direct adjustment, and that's why with some of the newer players, that they're not as polished. But would those 10 years in the major leagues have been better for him? Like, I look at that and say, if he's 10 years younger with those skills, I think that they would have played. And I think you definitely could be looking at a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, so while we're waiting on the lockout going on, it's good to kind of look at. I know Dusty Baker's in spring training, looking at some of the prospects, looking at some of the minor leaguers. I think it's just AAA right now. I really don't know who's in spring training, because I know Alex McKenna was not in spring training. So some of the players are not in, they have not reported yet. So I don't know who's in spring training or not. But to be on the 40-man roster, you're part of the baseball union. And if you're not on 40-man roster, then you're not. So Pedro Leon is not. Then you have people like, I believe Jeremy Pena is. So just looking at what's going on, I just want to briefly talk about what's going on. So we still don't, the players and owners are still far apart in what's going on, but they're getting closer. They're getting closer to making somewhat of a deal. There's still some big differences, but the owners are coming a little bit closer to getting close to reaching a deal with the players. Now, will that still affect the season? I don't know. Will the owners say, okay, I know we set this Monday, February 28th as the D Day. If we do not set a deal, then we're gonna go and have a delayed season. So Phil, I want to just I know you're in Canada, and just what's your outside view from different country of what's going on?
Yeah, as a bit of a pessimist, I at the beginning of this thought that this could take a while. And fundamentally, when you break it down, some people have kind of chronicled this better than others because you get the basic. It's billionaires versus millionaires, and yes, money always talks. But fundamentally, we've seen a big shift in baseball over the past few years. That players kind of flame out younger. We can debate why when we went through a generation of players that all of a sudden were rejuvenated in their 30s, that doesn't happen anymore. But we are seeing that it's become a young man's game. However, within that, so if a player, the typical player, if they debut at 23 or 24, they're under team control for 6 years, can't become a free agent until they're 30. There's less of a chance for these guys to get paid, and teams just aren't signing players that are 29 or 30 anymore to these long-term deals. So the owners kind of look at it as a way of maybe having their cake and eating it too. And through my through the Cuba lens, the way that everything I kind of try to pivot back to is that 2018 agreement where it looked like there was going to be a legal path to the majors for players. But since then, and if this is kind of a microcosm for the negotiations where everything is, they get the best of both worlds. They're getting the players out of Cuba, they're paying them less. And increasingly, in baseball, like the numbers show it, they've had wage stagnation. I know that sounds offensive to the average person for what I make, what they make in the run of a year. But when you look at it, the numbers actually show it both in nominal and funds that basically players are making less and less while revenues go up and up. But there is a level within that it's because teams maybe have either gotten smarter with their scouting. We do have what I think right now is one of the best generations of young talent, guys that have broken in at 20 and 21 doing things that, ultimately lead to the Hall of Fame. So, teams are getting smarter and more judicious with how they spend their money. So I get it. They're the owners are basically thinking nothing's wrong. The players looking and saying, okay, most of our guys aren't getting paid or getting that huge payday. So where that where that meets, that's why we've been listening to basically everybody speculating, flipping a coin every hour, tweeting every hour based on if they look outside, if it's sunny we got a deal, if it's cloudy it's like Groundhog Day. Did the
It is.
groundhog predict what was going to happen in these negotiations? So
Yeah, exactly. And I guess for me, the most frustrating thing is if these owners look at the trajectory of their own profits, giving away more money, they would still be gaining money over the years because their revenue would continue to go up. And so that's something I've chronicled on this show at nauseum, talked about, revenue going up, what the players get going down. And it's just amazing because I don't know, like to me right now, the owners are the ones that look like that they are really the ones holding it up. But regardless of what goes on there, we will have baseball. I know that players have said we can't afford to not have a season. So there's going to be a season. It may not be 162 games. Technically, they got until March 3rd. If you're listening to today, it's actually March 1st. So we got a couple more days. We brought on the Cuban baseball expert, Phil Selig. I mean, this guy is a photojournalist. He's been going to Cuba for 10 plus years. He's gotten to know players. He's gotten to see the games in person. And what a great thing to have you on to share your knowledge with us. We'll definitely be tapping into you, maybe get you on a post game this year or something if Yuli does something great, and we'll talk about that. So, I just really think that it still looks like we don't know where Carlos Correa is going. We don't know what's happening with these baseball talks. But at the end of the day, Cuban baseball seems to be king in Houston, Texas. I'm H-Town Wheelhouse and Eric the Man Huysman. Phil, tell us where they can find you one more time before we close out.
Yeah, everybody can find me at cubadugout.com, or all of my handles are Cuba Dugout. And actually, I do provide high def feeds when they're available of the Cuban National Series. So I know it's not quite Major League Baseball, but if anybody has, they're looking to scratch that itch between here and whenever MLB comes back, check out my Twitter links there for that. And if you have any questions about the game on the island, off the island, always there to hopefully try and answer those.
Yeah, and don't forget that Locked On Astros is it should be your first listen every day, but your second listen should be Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on major leagues, past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. And one more mention for MLB prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. We have had a great time. Thank you so much. I'm H. John Wellhouse. He's Eric the Man Huysman. We are Locked On Astros. We're your team every day.